Hey, it's Mike here, and today, the definition of veganism in particular, a somewhat subtle language interpretation issue that I'm seeing over and over again with regard to the Vegan Society's definition of veganism, which appears to be the one that most people are using. I think that the interpretation or misinterpretation of a single word within this definition can just widely mess with the scope of what veganism actually is. So we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty here a little bit with the semantics, which some people might find super interesting, and others hopefully still find somewhat interesting. Also, I've started posting on TikTok regularly again over the last week or so check that out. And I'm really trying to get shorts out on all platforms because apparently that's what the world and social media wants. I'm not the best in the world at doing a bunch of different platforms, but I'm gonna try. Anyway, let's get back to it. The Vegan Society and its founders like Donald Watson coined the term vegan, and since then it makes sense that they ended up making an official definition that has become the most widely used one. They're the OG. You know, I've mentioned it a lot. I like it. I like how it's not like insanely hardline sounding, but it still captures the gist of veganism and the basic goals of it. And here it is for those that aren't familiar. Quote, veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And then it goes into a part which people aren't as familiar with, which is, and by extension, promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of animals, humans, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. But it is the case that over the years, I've seen over and over again people sort of use this definition improperly to get a little bit more lenient of a definition than it is actually saying. And I could spend hours digging up footage and outing people, but I don't think we need any more vegan infighting than there already is. And it all comes down to one word in the definition which can be misinterpreted, and I was definitely guilty of misinterpreting it earlier as a vegan, and that is practicable. Practicable. There's two issues here. One, a lot of vegans who maybe just skimmed over it or heard other people mention it and they just thought that it said practical there, not practicable, but practical, and other ones who just think that the definition is roughly the same, basically means the exact same thing, and there are similarities. Heck, if you type practical definition into Google, it will actually give you practicable as a similar word right there, bam. It's also the case that the word practical is way more widely used in the English language, especially in America, but looking to Google trends in Google searches to emphasize this, yeah, practical is so much more used there. Practicable, which is the red line, is flat compared to the blue line, which is practical magic. It's not practicable magic. And just to emphasize how this is an actual issue, and I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere, when I was recording the definition, after it, Lindy was like, what? I thought it was practical, and she's been vegan for like 12 or 13 years or something. How long? For over 15 years. All right, now to actually understand what I'm talking about, we have to go through the definitions of these words and compare them and how they're different. So first, let's do practical from Cambridge University. There's a ton of different definitions, but the sub-definition that is most relevant here is, quote, fitting the needs of a particular situation in a helpful way, with the example of, we didn't want to spend the night at the motel, but it just wasn't practical to do the trip in one day. In other words, a lot of times it's basically synonymous with convenient. And of course, the definition of convenient is, quote, fitting in well with a person's needs, activities, or plans. So you can see how when you're thinking of it in terms of convenient, practical can really loosen the definition of veganism. Imagine this definition where it says veganism is a philosophy, blah, 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 which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and convenient, all forms of exploitation. Yeah, not doing that great. And yeah, practical is really just a subjective word. You could say it's not practical when you first go vegan to actually turn around all of the labels on all the food you eat and try and find vegan versions of those, and because label reading is not practical. Or you think it isn't practical to be worrying about really small amounts of, say, milk powder or other dairy products in foods, an argument that I've heard made for people who are starting to go vegan, that they just shouldn't worry about it. And it's a whole other topic of like, how much should somebody be trying to fully adopt that definition definition as they're transitioning. We don't need to worry about that, but you can see how practically we have a problem. And it goes without saying that one person's practical can be entirely different than another's. Say you're a trust fund person who can spend 8 hours a day just focusing on how to reduce animal exploitation as much as is possible in your life, but then there might be somebody who's working like 3 jobs and has to run from place to place, and then you can just say, oh, the only practical thing for them to do is just get a random beef burger at McDonald's on the way, but they're vegan still because it's practical. All right, but now let's get into the word that is actually in the definition, of course, practicable, and the definition of that is, quote, capable of being put into practice or of being done or accomplished. A simple way to delineate these two is that practicable can just be thought of as practiceable, and some other good synonyms for it include feasible, doable, realistic, and you also have possible, which is funny because it kind of is redundant in terms of the definition of veganism, possible and synonymous with possible, practicable. There are, of course, subtle differences, but let's break it down further with a real world example. It is practicable. You can, in practice, spend an extra 10 minutes looking at labels to figure out whether or not there is milk powder in a product, or just quickly if the allergen is there in bold. Or to go further, maybe you're traveling and it would take you quite a bit of extra effort. It would be an inconvenience and not as practical to spend extra time searching for vegan options in a foreign city. But it is still practicable in that you are capable of doing that in practice, so you have to do it. Otherwise, the vegan gods will be mad at you. Things like this are feasible, they are possible, they can be painful to do and annoying to do, but they can be done. And of course, these are things that get easier every time you try them. And now that you understand the language distinction here, you can see how the veganism definition here can actually be cited as a bit of a cop-out to not worry about things not being vegan in certain situations. For example, my friend did tell me of a longer term, like public figure YouTuber who actually ended up using beauty products that were not vegan, saying that it was just not practical for them to find the vegan alternative, which seems kind of crazy. And that brings us to the lesser known second half, final sentence really of the definition, which I think could be more widespread. It's just about dietary stuff, but here it is, quote, in dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. Beyond diet, I think it's the idea of dispensing with all animal products wholly or partly altogether, and that would of course apply to things like makeup. And this is the point where I want to explore, like, how far should practicable be taken, because there are things that can be accomplished that would induce great stress upon an individual. For example, you can talk about dodging any insect that you could possibly harm in every step and constantly being focused on that. And then just, I understand the other side's general attitude of wanting to make it practical or interpret it as just practical, because obviously you can be stressed out about being really perfect in this situation, and you can end up getting burnt out and then not being vegan at all if it becomes such a stressful experience. And that is where I think this definition is used the most. It's like, hey, well, the definition of veganism itself means that you don't have to bend head over heels and go insane to not harm animals. You just have to do it in what they are saying is a practical sense. In the end, with risk of getting way too in the details and in our head about this, I just want to say I'm not trying to attack the vegan society's definition here and say like it's not good enough or anything like that. If anything, it's a problem with them probably having a higher education level and just larger vocabulary than most people do. No, and using a way lesser known word, practicable, which somebody like me starting out being vegan and a bunch of other vegans might just skim over, have their brain overwrite it. And yeah, possible and practicable, they both start with a P. There's a little bit of alliteration there, and that alliteration makes it easier to remember. So that's probably why I remember that part at all. But yeah, the definition here is not possible and convenient. It is possible and doable. or feasible. That's the main thing here. Now, of course, it is a whole nother conversation as to whether vegans widely should just say that's the authority on veganism. I'm choosing to follow that definition. And, you know, how many other definitions are there out there? I don't know. How many people would agree on those definitions? This is a whole nother conversation. So let me know down below what you think about this definition and this sort of semantic issue. And maybe you have your own definition you want to throw down. I have another one right here. It is, don't support animal products in any way, but don't go insane in the process either. Is that really a definition or just a piece of advice? All right, that's all for today. Again, you can check out my TikTok because I'm hoping to continue to post regularly there. I also have my Patreon if you want to support me. Feel free to like and subscribe, all that good stuff. And thank you for watching.